So I particularly want to thank and direct our attention to Katie Rast, who has led our early childhood learning and development programs and got us to this point. Katie, where are you? There you are. Thank you. And before I introduce our fireside chat presenters, I want to tease you for one moment and to tell you, make sure you don't leave until you hear from Katie, our last presenter, on what's next, because there are big dollars attached to what she's going to talk about, and it will be an opportunity for us to tell you about the next phase of deploying Guy Clum's incredible legacy on behalf of our youngest San Diegans and their working families. So I'm now really excited to introduce our fireside chat speakers and presenters. First is Sam Browning, and Sam serves as the Global Director for Engagement for Boeing, whose presence is increasing here in San Diego County. Sam oversees not only global engagement, but corporate philanthropy and a myriad of other responsibilities at Boeing. He also, prior to Boeing, was at Thrive Washington that really helped to set Washington State on a much better path towards early childhood learning and development for all of its working families. And what's personally gratifying for me about Sam is he also on his resume has time well spent at Seattle's Community Foundation. Also, really excited that we have Kris Perry with us, and Kris is the Deputy Secretary of California's Health and Human Services Agency and Governor Newsom's lead authority and advisor on early childhood issues. Kris has come back to California. She was here previously as California's First Five Director, and then of course did such a great job, she went to Washington to lead national First Five efforts. And we're so glad to have her back and to see what Kris, Governor Newsom, and our legislature does to really help advance early childhood learning and development. So Sam and Kris, thank you for joining us today.
This is a pretty nice venue, right, Sam?
It's pretty nice. I'm going to sit up
I
here
think
so I can see the plane.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can take a look over and see what's happening with your product line. Which I think is a great idea at this point. Thank you for that. Well, Sam and I have known each other for a number of years now in all of these different iterations. We first met in 2013 when then President Obama hosted a White House summit on early childhood education, which was not the first time it had ever happened, but it was the first time it had happened in my career. And it was a pretty spectacular event because we showcased public-private investment in early childhood education. And at that point in time, we were able to highlight more than $300 million in private investment around the country in early childhood education, in addition to the billions of dollars that the Obama administration and Congress approved to support childcare, pre-K, home visiting, and a number of other federally funded early childhood programs. So Sam, that was a pretty great time to meet.
Well, it was a beautiful room.
It was a beautiful room. It was a beautiful room. In fact, they just recently had another summit, I understand.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah.
I don't know if it was in the same room or not, but they did. So we're here today to talk a little bit about what we're doing now in our current roles and share a little bit about what we hope we can do with you in San Diego. Always amazing and wonderful to be here. Every time I come here, I learn something new, and I go back and I have huge envy that San Diego is leading the way with 211. It's leading the way with its First Five investments and the way it's embedded and incorporated into county government. It's incredibly important that you have such great philanthropic partners and, of course, your business community. So with that, let's have a show of hands. How many of you are employers? And if you are if you're in government or nonprofit, you're also an employer. So everybody raise your hand if you're an employer. It's about half the people. How many of you are parents or grandparents of young children? Wow, pretty significant number. And how many of the parents in the audience have had to make tough choices about your career or your spouse or partner's career because you had childcare issues? And how many of you that are grandparents have watched your children struggle with their childcare issues and have felt, yeah, no one. Okay, great. So this is, a way of inviting you into a conversation about this problem that we're all struggling with, which is how do we keep our economy growing and going strong by investing in families, in 2 generations, to make sure that they're not only performing at work in the way that you'd like them to do, but they're also able to do what they need to do at home. So with that, so ready?
I'm ready.
Boeing, Sam, has cared about childcare for a long time. In fact, I remember your former, or maybe 2 CEOs ago, did an ad for us when I was at First 5 California as one of the leading business voices on early childhood. So tell us a little bit about why Boeing cares about childcare.
All right. First of all, I'm going to really try hard not to shout out 737, but it's already happened twice. But oh well, I'm kind of a nerd about that, and I'm not actually doing anything but looking at my notes on my phone.
Those are really good glasses if you can read that.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to talk about. One is as an employer, what we care about, and the other is as a corporate citizen, what we care about. And maybe I'll start with the employer part, because that's most of the people in the room, whether you'll admit it or not. So we really see in our industry that when I first started at Boeing in 2007, we would talk about how in 5 years, 50% of the workforce would be eligible to retire. And we did that for about 6 or 7 years. We still said the same thing. And what happened was I started in 2007 and the economy crashed in 2008 and nobody left. So it was the same statistic, and I thought, oh, look, there's another one. We didn't really change the number because the number didn't change. But then all of a sudden, once the economy really came back up, wow, people retired. And we really saw a real difference in how our company had to respond to attracting new talent and to retaining a generation that, I don't know how many of you know millennials deeply, but if they're in the same job a year later, they feel like they've completely stagnated in their career. and I know 3 very deeply, my children, and then and then I know others as well, very well. Then they're looking for what's next, and if the company they work for isn't doing everything they can to help make them feel like, yes, it's the right company, you may need to find a different job within the company, then they really have to think about, okay, well, I guess I have to go somewhere else. So we have really dramatically changed our benefits package to attract younger people into our workforce. 2 years ago, we didn't really have a very good parental leave policy. Now you get 12 weeks paid parental leave above and beyond FMLA. We provide $10,000 reimbursement for adoption for any kind of travel or other expenses related to adoption to help adoptive parents. And we actually got recognized this last month by the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption as one of the 20 best companies in the country for that. And we have really looked at all sorts of ways in which we are really examining how we can help our employees, and like every kind of employee, folks on the factory floor, engineers, folks in our offices, everywhere, they are all facing the same issues, which is in a city like Seattle, for instance, the Puget Sound area is where half of our worldwide workforce lives and works. They can't afford an apartment, much less childcare. And so they are traveling far, an hour and a half, 2 hours to work. And to try to tack onto that, having to find some way to have childcare along the route, that sort of thing, it's a big, big issue for our employees. So we have really started to work not only on what is our benefits package, but how are we engaged as a citizen in the communities where we operate to make sure that childcare is available and affordable for our employees, and that government and community leaders are having a discussion about what the community needs to do collectively in order to improve childcare. A couple of examples of that: we've been really deeply involved on a national scale, as Kris said, in the discussion about childcare quality and what really makes childcare quality. We've had some great wins that we have seen in communities where we have been engaged, where Washington State, for instance, was the first state in the nation to have math readiness be part of their kindergarten readiness assessment. We were very deeply involved in that. We've seen in California, we were really involved with First Five. In St. Louis, we have been really involved on a more local level in their childcare affordability efforts, particularly in a lot of the Ferguson rebuilding, community rebuilding that has happened. We've been really involved there, specifically around the issue of working parents and how we can help folks who live in those communities be able to afford to have jobs and have their children in a safe place where they're actually learning good stuff. So I would say that is more the advocacy side of what we're doing. And then in addition, as a corporate citizen, I lead a group that makes a lot of investment in early childhood programs. We are focused on math preparation in particular, but have really been in this for the long game. We've been in it for decades at this point. And I will tell you, it is sometimes very lonely in a room when Boeing is the only company represented in a conversation about early childhood, which is full of service organizations and providers and philanthropy and like us and maybe one other company. There's so much room in this conversation for business to be involved, and it always kind of surprises or confounds me that there is not more business representation in the room, because it is something that any business, no matter the size of the business, really cares about or should care about, because it's something that every business's employees care about. So we have really tried as much as we can to rally the troops and get in any kind of business forum that I'm in about education. I always try to make sure that even if they're not talking about early childhood on the stage, that I at least ask a question about early childhood to make sure that folks are really in the conversation and paying attention to the issues. So with that, I want to hear a little bit from you. So I haven't talked to you since you changed jobs. So tell me a little bit about what the transition has been like and what you're really focusing on. It seems like California leads the way in a lot of ways in the country, and certainly in early childhood that has been true. There have been some great examples of things that have been propagated elsewhere. What in this platform that you have now, what are you going to take on? What are you going to do?
I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary. The governor was sworn in just 13 months ago, roughly. And in that short period of time, we have been working very hard to figure out how to shore up the child care and pre-K systems in California, as well as thinking through more strategically what are the different levers we can pull, policy and otherwise, across other departments, other agencies, other parts of the state budget, that also impact the lives of families with young children. So it's been kind of fun to think about all of this more like three-dimensional chess than just sort of, how do I move this piece on preschool year after year after year? Not that that's not hugely important, really important, or on childcare, because those are core investments. But in addition to that, we're thinking really broadly about what other economic incentives are there that would help employers or help providers or help families meet some of their day-to-day economic needs. So we've doubled the earned income tax credit in California right off the bat for families with kids under 6. Mm-hmm. We've looked at how to expand and increase access to paid family leave, knowing there is a huge shortage of infant care in California. No matter how much this doesn't work either. It is working, okay.
From up here,
did anybody hear anything I just said? Fabulous. Great, I'm not gonna repeat myself. We're also looking at how to expand and increase access to paid family leave, knowing there's a huge infant care shortage, but also more importantly, knowing when parents of newborn children or new children have an opportunity to bond and attach, there are actually improved health and wealth incomes associated with that bonding and attachment. There are actually policy implications for bonding and attachment, and this is a really key strategy or lever that we're trying to pull to show families we care about them bonding and attaching to their children, we care about them providing high quality care, and we want them to have that big first step be as positive as possible. In addition to that, we're doing things like putting child savings accounts in place so that we are sending a signal to parents that we expect and hope that their children choose a higher education opportunity when they're older, creating that growth mindset. We're looking at ways to improve access to home visiting for families that have any indication at all that they may be at higher risk for postpartum depression or other difficult birth outcomes. We're really looking not only at those core care investments that have defined the field for generations, but we're trying to think more broadly about all of the other supports and systems that are in place that support families over the course of their child's life. Increased access to early literacy through the libraries, increased access to healthy air and water. I could go on, but I just wanted to sort of start really big and say the transition's been a little overwhelming at times because we're going so far past the traditional investment areas into a variety of new policies. And I also think it would be remiss of me not to sort of congratulate the governor on not only last year's budget, but this year's budget, because budgets are expressions of values. They're value statements. And he is putting early childhood front and center now 2 years in a row, and I think he will continue to do so. It's really exciting to work and live in a state with an early childhood champion governor. It's way overdue, and I think it's an opportunity for all of us to focus on our top priorities as communities. And in San Diego, you are so far ahead. In some ways, you're making the whole state look good. Thank you. Because you have done things here that required great collaboration and compromise. You've built systems like 211 that centralize intake, that centralize triage and the support of families in a way that's advanced you. And now the state's looking at what you're doing and saying, what if? What if we could all be this organized? What if we could all be using technology to support families in a more efficient and effective manner? So thank you for the example you're setting. The last thing I'll say about this transition is it's only been 1 year. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and we know that in order to get more done, we need a plan. So initially, we get investments out there. We come up with some policy solutions, but we have to have a more strategic approach over these next, what I hope are these next 7 years, of thinking methodically, in a sequential and annual way, what can we do with each and every budget to move towards universal access to high quality preschool? What can we do to move to greater access to high quality childcare? Because we believe that those are key investments in our entire economy in helping families, whether they work at Boeing or any place else, achieve their goals at work and with their children.
Excellent. You know, one of the things I think about is, when I was at Thrive Washington, I used to say all the time is, we all think we understand the K-12 system because we went through it, but we don't actually. And we have no idea what the early learning system is because it's not a system, it's a system of systems. And childcare is, to a great extent, a system of small businesses, and we don't treat it as such. And the business community would really do well by including childcare in the discussion, because that is a whole lot of small business owners that really care about their business and about making it as good as it can be.
Has Boeing made specific grants around early childhood in a way to sort of spur additional investment or innovation?
I would say it's been more about our advocacy. We've been really involved in for instance, in places where we are that are more urban, We've been really involved in transit-oriented development projects to try to get, if they're building a light rail system or something in a city and they're going to build a lot of housing, how can we be sure that that housing includes space for childcare centers, for libraries, for community organizations like Boys and Girls Club or that sort of thing. We've been really involved in that kind of thing. Also in terms of focusing on how do we increase quality without leaving providers left holding the bag? How do we really look at how we can get that to be a part of the conversation about, yes, quality is important, those providers need support to be able to attain that quality.
Yeah. That reminds me of just what a critical role philanthropy plays overall as sort of almost the R&D of early childhood policy in thinking more innovatively about what testing ideas and looking at what some other options might be outside of the traditional investments in care, which, by the way, are really, really core and really important. But thinking through what are some of the innovations around quality, dual language learning, teacher training and technical assistance, innovating and modifying facilities. Like, there are whole pieces of the early childhood system that in and of themselves warrant investment and research and evaluation that then can inform the work that we're doing at the state level, which is what's so exciting about working at the state level right now, is thinking about scale. How do we take the very best thinking, the very best work that's going on in the state and scale it, right? This is that opportunity. When you have a governor that's a champion like this, and he's putting his money where his mouth is, it's like, all right, how do we make sure those investments reflect the very best thinking between philanthropy, business, and local government, so that we're enhancing and expanding the work that you're already doing versus let's start brand new, ideas that we, haven't necessarily even tested yet because we came up with it. Mm-hmm. This is a really important moment for all of us to think strategically about what the most critical investments would be for scale.
Right. I think about the kind of innovation that we can invest in that can really show a new model or show something different. We invest in an outdoor preschool program called Tiny Trees, which provides preschool in public park every day, no matter the weather. And kids have these little rubber outdoor zip-up suits that they wear if it's crappy, and you can see them. You go and their activity for the afternoon is sliding down this mud hill, but it's very high quality preschool, and that's great. The reason that we're so interested in and wanted to invest in it is because one of the big barriers for starting preschool is licensing a facility. And this is a whole different way of getting around that and really reducing the cost, the startup cost of childcare. And we really wanted to help show, hey, look, it not only shows that here's an alternative to that, but it also highlights the problem that exists for people who want to start a small business as a childcare.
And it is a huge business, right? I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar business nationwide. I just saw a statistic. It's a $57 billion tuition line item. If you looked at what people are paying for childcare across the country, and in California, since we're obviously the largest state, you can imagine that we're a large percentage of that. And on the flip side, we're dealing with some really difficult issues around poverty and income inequality. There are families, right now, roughly half of new births are eligible for Medi-Cal. And so we have great opportunity and great, we're making new investments, billions of dollars in early childhood and family support, but at the same time, we have families that are falling further and further behind and are desperate for these services, and we still don't have the adequate resources to meet those needs. And in some ways, what's been interesting about coming back from Washington, where I ran a bipartisan advocacy organization, and we polled every year, and we asked voters, Republican and Democrat, independent, we would break them down demographically to look at gender, age, et cetera. And what came across year after year after year, no matter whether it was during the Great Recession or after, was that it didn't matter what people's party affiliation was. Everybody understood what a critical investment childcare was, or early learning, because it affects the functioning of the entire family. It hits them in the pocketbook in a way almost no other family expense does. It can be as much or more than your housing expenses, et cetera. And so we are, with the Gavin Newsom administration, looking for, partnerships, bipartisan partnerships, business, public-private partnerships, ways of meeting the needs of families no matter where they are, because we know that they're falling behind. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take the will of supervisors like Supervisor Fletcher and so many of you that I've met that are on school boards. You really are in a position to create this, this future with us and meet the needs of families that are falling behind.
Well, I think about, we really see the bipartisan nature of this issue is advantageous to us as a business in our advocacy efforts, because it opens doors for us that might otherwise not open, and gives us an opportunity to create relationships with legislators or local elected officials or folks who otherwise would not be super interested in talking to us, because they wouldn't see that what we are doing is particularly relevant to what they're trying to do. It's been a huge opportunity for us in that way as well.
So I'm going to bring us to a close here.
Okay.
As much as I would just like to sit here all day and talk about all of this, what gets you most fired up when you think about all the potential in this room, in California, across the western coast? What gets you most fired up when you think about the opportunities with early learning?
Oh, gosh. I think what makes me really excited is how much government is starting to recognize the role that business can play and reaching out. We just got the South Carolina governor just reached out to us and said, hey, I want to have full day kindergarten for all kids in South Carolina. Will you help us do that? And how exciting to be asked and not be the one knocking on the door saying, hey, our families, our employees need that. That is super exciting to me, that it really feels like this shift in the conversation that you and I have been involved in for a very long time. And it's exciting to see that happen. Mm-hmm. What about you?
So many things, but when I really think about the potential to do a far better job with babies in California in so many different ways, in partnership with business, employers, local government, I think we've done we've basically covered the pre-K problem in California. In other words, we've invested in that for years, but I feel like it presents us with an opportunity to do something really big around newborns, toddlers, birth to 3, in a way that I think would greatly enhance all of the work that's going on with 4-year-olds, and those of you who are working with middle schoolers and high schoolers and you're working with college age. They are babies to start with. And so there is something so exciting for me to be in a part of administration that really wants to see us invest in 2-generation models that from conception till cradle to career, that we are all in on all of it. And so I look forward to partnering with many of you on this in the future.
And I'd just like to say that 5 of the 8 planes that have landed while we've been sitting here were Boeing planes. So more than half, I'm just saying.
All right, now we're going to land the conversation.
Exactly.
All right, thanks, everybody.